At 12 minutes past 9, Hale Mill stopped breathing. The great tidal wheel shuddered once, groaned against its axle, and fell still while 200 sacks of winter grain waited in the yard. The sudden silence struck harder than any crash. Men turned from the loading platform. A horse stamped beside the grain cart. Flour dust hung motionless in the shaft of light above the main floor, as if even the air had forgotten what came next. Rosamund Hale looked first at the office clock, then through the open doorway toward the race. The tide should have been rising instead. The water below the wheel had dropped nearly 3 feet. "Close every chute," she ordered. "Move the waiting grain off the lower stones. Matthew, no one touches the shaft until we know why it stopped." Head miller, Matthew Pike repeated the commands, and the men moved. Rosamund stepped into the yard, gathering her skirts above the mud. 3 coastal parishes depended on Hale Mill for flour before the month turned. If the wheel did not run by noon, the farmers would begin taking their grain elsewhere. If it did not run by tomorrow, Silas Crowther would hear of it. The thought had scarcely formed when a shout rose from the lower walkway. Ben Coyle, the youngest mill boy, had climbed onto the service rail to pull free a rope snagged beneath the platform. One rotten board split under his foot. He slipped sideways, catching the rail with one hand while his boots struck the wall below. Rosamund ran toward him. "Hold fast, Ben." The boy's face had gone white. "I'm trying, Mum." Before Pike reached the steps, a stranger came through the open gate. He wore a weather-stained coat, mud to his knees, and boots that looked as though they had crossed half of Devon without rest. He did not call out. He crossed the yard in 4 quick strides, dropped onto one knee beside the broken plank, and caught Ben by the wrist. "Don't pull against me," he said. "Turn your shoulder toward the wall." Ben obeyed. The stranger braced one hand beneath the rail and drew the boy upward with controlled strength until Pike could seize the back of Ben's coat. Together they brought him onto solid boards. Rosamund knelt at once. "Where are you hurt?" Ben tested his ankle. "Only frightened, Ma'am. That is not an injury, but it is not nothing. Sit by the office stove until Mr. Pike examines you." She turned to the stranger. Up close, he looked less like a vagrant than a man who had been forced into poverty too recently, to understand how it should alter his posture. His coat was worn, but the seams had once been fine. His hands were scraped, yet his speech carried no local accent. "You have my thanks," she said. "You may have saved his life." He saved himself by listening. The stranger looked past her toward the water gauge staff fixed beside the race. "May I see that?" Rosamund followed his gaze. The oak staff bore years of tide marks cut by her father, then darker notches added by her husband. "Why?" "Because the tide is rising at the estuary. You cannot see the estuary from here." "No, but I can smell it." Pike frowned. "Smell the tide? Salt water reaches the creek before the surface changes here. It is in the air." The stranger stepped no closer until Rosamund nodded. Then he walked to the gauge and crouched. He ran one finger over the wood without disturbing it. "This notch is fresh." Rosamund joined him. A dark line crossed the staff several inches below the old autumn mark. At first glance, it looked weathered. Close up, the cut was too sharp. River mud had been rubbed into it to disguise the pale oak beneath. "That was not there last week," she said. Pike bent beside them. "Nor yesterday." The stranger looked upstream. "How far does your lease carry the water right?" "From the willow bend to the seawall." "Any drainage cuts above the mill?" "None that cross the race." "Then either your records are wrong, your tide has changed its habits, or someone has given your water another road." Rosamund rose. Who are you? A man in need of work. That is not a name. His mouth almost moved into a smile. Dominic Kerr. What trade? Naval survey work. Coastal channels, tidal soundings, damaged sluices. Pike glanced at the stranger's clothes. You have papers? Not with me. References? Not where I can reach them today. Rosamund studied him. A respectable man would have offered explanation before being asked. A dishonest one would have prepared a better lie. Dominic Kerr looked exhausted, hungry, and far too observant. Before she could question him further, wheels sounded on the lane. A polished dark carriage turned through the gate. Silas Crowther descended before the footman had fully lowered the step. He wore black gloves and a coat without a spot of road mud, though the lane had been wet since dawn. His clerk followed with a leather document case. Rosamund looked again at the office clock through the window. The mill had been silent for 11 minutes. Crowther could not have heard of it in the village and reached Hale Mill so quickly unless he had been waiting nearby. Mrs. Hale, he called, his expression arranged into concern. I came as soon as word reached me. Word travels with impressive speed when it favors you. Crowther's eyes touched the still wheel, the scattered workers, and Dominic's worn coat. I feared this day would come. A tidal mill is a harsh responsibility even for an experienced man. Then it is fortunate the mill belongs to an experienced woman. Belongs is a generous word. His clerk opened the case. Crowther withdrew a folded agreement and held it out. Your late husband's private note falls due in 7 days. Given the stoppage, I am prepared to purchase the lease, assume the debt, and retain most of your workers. The yard quieted. Rosamund saw the men listening while pretending not to. Crowther had chosen the place deliberately. He wanted her refusal to sound reckless before those whose wages depended on the answer. You brought a purchase agreement before you knew the wheel had stopped, she said. I have carried it for some time. In hope, in prudence. Your prudence appears to know my misfortunes before I do. His smile thinned. Grief has made you suspicious. The mention of her husband landed exactly where Crowther intended. For nearly a year, Rosamund had managed Hale Mill through illness, burial, creditors, and men who spoke more slowly to her when they wished to call her foolish without using the word. She kept her hands still. My grief has made me accurate. Accuracy will not turn that wheel. Neither will your ownership. Crowther glanced toward the workers. You would risk their bread to preserve your pride. Rosamund turned to Pike. Will every man receive today's wage if the wheel remains still? Yes, ma'am. Will every farmer's grain remain dry and properly recorded? Yes, ma'am. She faced Crowther again. Then no one's bread is being risked by my pride. Only your bargain is being delayed. A quiet murmur moved through the yard. Crowther's eyes hardened, though his voice remained smooth. 7 days, Mrs. Hale. After that, the note is mine to call. Then call it in 7 days. He folded the agreement slowly. You may find the mill less loyal than your workers. A mill has no loyalty. It has mechanisms. Those can be examined. Crowther's gaze shifted to Dominic. And this man is your examiner? This man saved a boy while you arrived with paperwork. Dominic said nothing, but his attention remained on Crowther's boots. Red clay marked one heel beneath the polished leather. Crowther noticed the look and stepped back. I will leave you to your surveyor. His tone made the word an insult. Enjoy the novelty while it lasts. He returned to the carriage. As it turned toward the lane, Dominic walked to the edge of the race and looked upstream once more. Rosamund joined him. You saw something on his boot. Clay. There is clay on every road in Devon, not that colour. It is mixed with crushed lime. Where would that matter? Where someone wanted a wet bank to hold after being cut. Pike approached from behind them. You believe there is a channel? Dominic looked at the false notch, the low water, and the carriage disappearing beyond the hedgerow. I believe, mister. Crowther knew this wheel would stop before it did. Rosamund felt the weight of the purchase agreement, even though it was no longer in the yard. Can you prove it? Dominic turned toward her. The wind shifted, bringing the scent of salt from the estuary and the faint creak of a wheel that should have been moving. Give me 1 day, he said. Someone hasn't merely damaged your mill, Mrs. Hale. Someone has stolen the river. Rosamund gave Dominic Kerr 1 day, but she did not give him trust. Within 10 minutes of Crowther's departure, she sent Ben Coyle to the office stove, ordered Matthew Pike to inspect every bearing on the stopped wheel, and told Thomas Bell to bring 2 spades, a coil of rope, and the mill's oldest boundary sketch. Dominic watched without interrupting. That restraint counted in his favor. Not enough to erase the absence of papers, references, or a convincing explanation for his condition, but enough to keep her from dismissing him outright. They left the yard before noon and followed the mill race upstream. Pike walked ahead with the sketch. Thomas carried the tools. Dominic moved beside Rosamund, not close enough to presume familiarity, yet near enough to catch her if the bank gave way. The watercourse narrowed between alder roots and low stone walls. Its surface should have been climbing with the tide. Instead, it dragged sluggishly around exposed rocks. The loss begins above the willow bend, Dominic said. Rosamund looked at him. You have not measured it. I have watched the current against 6 fixed points since we left the mill. The flow weakens after each bend, but not evenly. That suggests water is leaving through an opening, not sinking through the bed. Pike glanced back. There has never been an opening. There was not one on your last survey, Dominic said. That does not mean there is not one today. Rosamund heard no arrogance in the answer, only certainty. She disliked how reassuring she found it. At the willow bend, Dominic stopped. Reeds crowded the outer bank, though the ground had been cleared there in late summer. He crouched and pressed 2 fingers into the mud. Red clay streaked his skin beneath a dusting of pale grit. The same mixture as Crowther's boot, Rosamund said. Yes. Lime? Pike asked. Dominic nodded. Crushed limestone. It helps wet clay bind quickly. Thomas pushed aside a curtain of reeds. A narrow cut appeared behind them, no wider than a man's shoulders at the mouth. Water whispered through it. Pike stared. That was not here in August. Dominic stepped into the shallow edge and followed the cut for several yards. It widened beneath the growth, its banks recently packed and disguised with old roots. A small wooden gate sat beneath the surface. Its iron hinge was sound. The pin holding the upper brace was not. Dominic touched it with the point of his knife. A bright mark appeared. Soft metal, he said. Too soft for a sluice pin. Rosamund joined him at the edge. Why use it? Because it bends under pressure. The gate can fail at a chosen tide, then appear to have broken naturally. Pike's face darkened. Chosen by whom? Dominic looked toward the meadow beyond the trees. The concealed channel ran in that direction, toward land leased by Crowther, someone who knew the mill's water level, the tide tables, and when the yard would be full of grain. Rosamund felt the true shape of the threat settle around her. This was not neglect, it was planning. Can the gate be closed? Not safely until we know where the channel ends. Then we follow it. Dominic rose. The bank may be unstable. so may my ownership in 7 days. His gaze rested on her face for a moment. You do not frighten easily. I frighten usefully. Something almost like approval entered his expression, then disappeared. They followed the hidden channel across the meadow, keeping to firmer ground. After nearly 100 yards, it widened into a drainage trench that turned toward Crowther's lower fields. Freshly cut willow branches had been laid over part of it. Beneath them, water moved steadily away from Hale Mill. Thomas swore under his breath. Pike lifted the old sketch. The lease line ends before this field. The water right does not, Rosamund said. The race is protected from the willow bend to the sea wall. Dominic examined the cut where it crossed the boundary. Where are the stones? Pike pointed to 2 empty hollows in the bank. There should be markers here. The earth had been filled recently. Rosamund saw red clay pressed beneath the grass. Removed, she said, or buried. Dominic crouched beside the nearer hollow and uncovered a splinter of dark wood. One side bore a shallow maker's stamp, too incomplete to read. He closed his hand around it before Pike could inspect it fully. Rosamund noticed. What did you find? He opened his palm. A fragment from the gate frame. And the mark? Not enough of it remains. It was not quite a lie, but it was not the whole truth. Rosamund filed the distinction away. We return to the mill, she said. We cannot repair a boundary dispute with 4 people and 2 spades. Dominic looked toward the flowing trench. You should post a watch here. My men work for the mill. They are not soldiers. Neither am I. The answer came too smoothly. Rosamund turned to him. Were you not with the Navy? Survey service attached to it. That is not the same thing. No. Again, the answer gave her nothing useful. Back at Hale Mill, Rosamund ordered Pike to send Thomas and Peter in alternating pairs to watch the willow bend until dark. Then she took Dominic into the office and closed the door. The room was small, lined with ledgers, tied books, and sacks of sample grain. Her father's wooden scoop hung beside the account shelf, its handle polished by years of use. Dominic's eyes moved over the records with the attention of a man entering an armory. You said you needed work, Rosamund began. I do. You also said you had no papers. They were in my trunk. Where is the trunk? With the coach that overturned north of Exeter. And your purse? In the same trunk. Your employer? Not near enough to help today. Your family? He hesitated. Not relevant. Everything becomes relevant when a stranger asks access to my mill. Dominic accepted that without protest. Rosamund folded her hands. I will hire you for 7 days. He did not smile. On what terms? 12 shillings, meals at the servants' table, and the room above the granary. You will inspect the waterworks, prepare a survey, and help restore safe flow. Every alteration must be approved by Mr. Pike or me. You will not issue orders to my workers in my name. You will not remove documents from this office. Dominic nodded once. Agreed. There is one more condition. If you conceal anything that places my people in danger, your employment ends immediately. This time, the pause was longer. Agreed. Rosamund heard the weight he placed on the word. Can you sign your name? Yes. She pushed a page toward him. Dominic took the pen. His handwriting was controlled and elegant, formed by training far beyond what his coat suggested. He signed Dominic Kerr. The name looked practiced, perhaps too practiced. Rosamund sanded the page. Mrs. Finch will bring food. You have not eaten today. I did not say that. Your hands did. He looked down at them, as though hunger had betrayed him more thoroughly than speech. Yesterday, he admitted. Then you will eat before returning upstream. The tide will turn within the hour, and a starving man makes poor measurements. A faint warmth entered his eyes. Do you always command strangers so quickly? Only those I employ. Dominic inclined his head. Then I will endeavor to deserve the wage. By dusk, a temporary brace had been fitted to the first gate under Pike's supervision. Enough water returned to the race for the wheel to shift half a turn, though not enough to begin grinding. Rosamund remained in the office balancing delayed orders while the workers secured the yard. Dominic ate in the servants' hall, then retired to the room above the granary. At least, that was what everyone believed. Near midnight, he left by the rear stair with a lantern covered beneath his coat. The tide had fallen, exposing more of the concealed channel. He followed it beyond the first gate and found a second sluice buried beneath a screen of willow roots. This one was broader, stronger, and newly built. Its timbers carried a clear stamped mark, a crown above 3 waves. Dominic stood motionless in the dark. The design belonged to Caldemir's private workshop. No local carpenter could have used it lawfully. He touched the mark once, then withdrew his hand. Behind him, the mill remained silent under the moon. "What have you done?" he whispered, though he did not yet know whether he was speaking to Crowther, to someone in his own house, or to himself. At first light, Rosamund found Dominic standing beside the upper race, with mud on his boots and a fresh scrape across one knuckle. He had returned to Hale Mill before the kitchen fire was lit, yet his bed above the granary had not been slept in. Matthew Pike noticed the same thing. He said nothing, but his stare rested on Dominic with the patience of a man waiting for a lie to ripen. Rosamund carried the mill's oldest boundary sketch under one arm. "You went upstream alone." Dominic looked toward the water rather than at her. "Yes," after agreeing that anything dangerous would be disclosed. "I found something that needed to be seen at low tide." "Then you should have woken Mr. Pike or me. You had been awake for nearly 20 hours. That was not your decision to make." The rebuke landed cleanly. Dominic's jaw tightened, but he did not defend himself. "You are right." Pike's eyebrows rose slightly. Men who had spent years around landowners and creditors were not accustomed to hearing those words without argument. Rosamund held out the boundary sketch. "Show us." They returned to the willow bend with Thomas Bell, carrying an iron probe and 2 lanterns. Morning mist lay low over the meadow. The concealed first gate remained braced, but a thin ribbon of water still escaped beneath it. Dominic led them beyond the reeds to the place he had found during the night. At low tide, the second sluice stood fully exposed. It was nearly 6 feet wide and set into a trench deep enough to carry the strongest autumn flow away from Hale Mill. Willow roots had been woven across the front to disguise the frame. Fresh clay sealed the sides. "This is no drainage cut," Pike said. "No," Dominic replied. "It is a diversion." He uncovered the stamped mark on the timber, a crown above 3 waves. Rosamund crouched beside it. "You knew this mark last night." Dominic did not answer quickly enough. "I recognized the style." "From where?" "A private workshop." "Whose?" His gaze moved to hers. "Caldemir." The name carried weight even in a muddy field. The Dukes of Caldemir owned coastal land, ship timber, salt marsh, and warehouses across 3 counties. Their crest appeared on estate gates and harbour documents, not on concealed sluices, stealing water from a widow's mill. Pike swore under his breath. "Why would Caldemir timber be here?" "It should not be," Dominic said. "The workshop does not sell marked beams." Rosamund watched him. "You know a great deal about its practices." "Naval surveyors work with estate yards when coastal defences are repaired. The explanation was plausible. It was also incomplete. "Can the mark be copied?" she asked. "Yes, but not easily. Then someone either stole the timber or received help." Dominic nodded. "And either possibility reaches farther than Crowther's meadow." Rosamund rose. "We document everything before touching the gate." She sent Thomas back for charcoal, paper, measuring cord, and 2 workers as witnesses. Dominic looked almost surprised. "You do not want the flow restored first. I want proof that survives restoration. Crowther may return. Then he will find us measuring what he hoped remained hidden." Dominic's expression changed. Not admiration exactly, recognition. Rosamund had seen that look only once before, from her father when she was 16 and corrected a grain merchant's false weight before 6 men at market. Dominic took out a brass compass from beneath his coat. "Then we begin with direction and distance." They worked for nearly 2 hours. Rosamund recorded each measurement, while Dominic marked the channel's course. From the first gate at the Willow Bend, the diversion ran 117 yards before widening at the second sluice. Beyond that, it angled toward Crowther's lower meadow and emptied into an old drainage ditch that had been deepened recently. Pike used the iron probe to test the filled hollows where the boundary stones should have stood. At the first hollow, he struck packed clay. At the second, he found nothing for nearly 3 feet, removed or buried. He said. Rosamund scraped the bank with the edge of her boot. Red clay appeared beneath the grass. Pale lime dust clung to the roots. Dominic knelt near the second hollow and pulled free a splinter from the concealed gate frame. This fragment carried no crest, only 2 shallow initials burned into the underside. E.V. Pike stared at them. Elias Venn. Rosamund looked up. "Who?" "Coastal surveyor," Pike said. "Worked this district before Mr. Hale took the lease. Drew the old creek charts and certified half the boundary stones between here and Belhaven." "When did he leave?" 5 years ago. Disappeared, more like." Dominic turned the splinter over in his hand. "Why?" "There were complaints. Fishermen lost access to an inlet after one of his surveys. 2 tenants said their grazing line moved between copies. Nothing came of it. Then Venn vanished. Rosamund felt the mystery tighten. And now his initials are on timber used to move my water." Dominic's face had gone still, or someone wants us to believe they are. "Do you recognize the workmanship?" "Yes. From Caldermere, from a survey office that worked under Caldermere authority." This time, the answer came with visible reluctance. Rosamund held his gaze. "You will tell me the rest when you have it." "I will. Not when you decide I can endure it. When you have it." A flicker of guilt crossed his face. "Agreed." They finished the sketch before altering anything. Rosamund then made the choice Pike expected her to avoid. "We restore part of the flow in daylight." Pike glanced toward Crowther's land. "He will know we found it." "Good." Dominic studied her. "You want him to react." "I want him to understand that secrecy is no longer his advantage. That may make him dangerous. He has already risked 3 parishes' grain and a boy's life." Rosamund looked at the concealed gate. "He is dangerous whether I am silent or not." Dominic inclined his head. "Then we close it by inches. The bank is new." Too much pressure at once could tear it apart. Under Pike's supervision, the men fitted a stronger brace and replaced the soft pin with iron from the mill stores. Dominic directed the sequence. But every instruction passed through Rosamund or Pike. The first inch brought only a tremor through the frame. The second sent water pressing back toward the lawful race. By the third, the current changed visibly. A broad, dark stream began turning toward Hale Mill. Rosamund felt the movement beneath her boots before she heard it. Far downstream, the silent wheel gave one low groan. Pike smiled for the first time that morning. She feels it. Not enough to grind, Rosamund said. Enough to prove she was starved. Dominic looked at her rather than the water. You speak of the mill as though it were alive. It fed me before I could read. It paid for my father's burial. It kept wages moving while my husband was ill. That earns a little personhood. His expression softened. And who keeps you moving? The question was too quiet, too personal. Rosamund bent to gather the papers. At present, arithmetic. Dominic did not press. That restraint unsettled her more than a compliment would have. Back at the mill, the wheel had turned half a revolution and stopped again. The returned flow was not yet sufficient, but hope had entered the yard. Workers moved with greater purpose. Pike posted 2 men at the Willow Bend and another near the second gate. Rosamund ordered the survey copied 3 times. 1 copy went into the office lockbox. 1 remained with Pike. Dominic carried the 3rd to the granary room, where he wrote a letter in a hand too elegant for the man he claimed to be. He addressed it to a solicitor in Exeter and asked for 3 things: every surviving record bearing Elias Venn's signature, the Caldemere Workshop timber ledger, and any recent filing concerning the water rights above Hale Mill. He began to sign Kershaw. The first letter formed beneath his pen before he stopped. He tore the page in half, fed it to the candle flame, and wrote again as Dominic Kerr. Downstairs, Rosamund opened the drawer where she had placed the muddy receipt fragment from the hidden bank. Under better light, the date became clear. 3 weeks before her husband's death, the amount matched nearly a month of mill wages. Beneath Crowther's signature, only 3 words remained from the payment purpose. Advance against the rest had been torn away. Rosamund pressed the paper flat with both hands. Her husband had never mentioned borrowing from Crowther. He had never told her the wages had been in danger. Outside, the wheel shifted once under the returning water, then fell still. Rosamund looked toward the ceiling, where the stranger with Caldemere knowledge was writing letters under a false name. One man she had trusted had hidden the truth before dying. Another had entered her mill carrying secrets he believed were his to manage. By noon, she no longer knew which mystery threatened Hale Mill more. The receipt lay between Rosamund's hands until the ink blurred beneath the strain of looking at it. 3 weeks before her husband's death. Nearly a month of wages. Advance against, followed by torn paper and silence. By afternoon, the office had become a chamber of questions. Matthew Pike brought the oldest lease chest from the locked storeroom. Dominic arrived carrying the survey copy he had made that morning. Mrs. Finch placed tea on the desk, saw Rosamund's face, and left without asking whether she would drink it. Rosamund unlocked the chest with the key she wore at her waist. Inside lay the original lease, tax receipts, maintenance accounts, tide records, and correspondence written in her father's broad hand. Her husband's papers were tied separately with faded blue ribbon. She did not touch them first. "The water rights," she said. Pike opened the lease to the marked page. The wording was clear. Hale Mill held lawful use of the tidal stream from the Willow Bend to the sea wall, including the right to maintain the race and prevent obstruction. Dominic leaned over the document without placing a hand on it. The boundary description refers to an attached survey. Pike searched the chest. No survey lay beneath the lease. Rosamund examined the binding. A narrow strip of paper remained beneath the thread. It had been cut away, not lost. Someone removed it, she said. Dominic held the stub toward the window. A faint watermark appeared when the light crossed it, a crown above 3 waves. Kaldemir paper, he said. Rosamund looked at him. You are certain? Yes, because naval surveyors use ducal, stationery. Because coastal survey copies prepared under Kaldemir authority were registered on estate paper. He pointed to 2 tiny punctures near the lower edge. These are archive registry marks. Then the missing page came from the same office connected to Elias Venn, most likely, and someone entered this house to remove it. Pike shook his head. The chest was kept in Mr. Hale's study before his illness. He had the key. Rosamund untied the blue ribbon around her husband's papers. Then perhaps no one needed to enter. The first bundle contained physician accounts. The second held grain purchases and repair estimates. Beneath them lay a folded memorandum addressed to Silas Crowther. The hand was unmistakably her husband's. Rosamund read it once, then again more slowly. He requested a private advance until the Michaelmas grain payments arrived. He promised repayment from winter contracts and asked Crowther not to approach Rosamund because she was already burdened beyond what a wife should be asked to bear. The words were meant kindly. That made them worse. Dominic said nothing. Rosamund continued reading. The borrowed sum covered 6 weeks of wages, repairs to the lower bearing, and physician charges. There was no mention of selling water rights, no transfer, no surrender of the lease. Relief came first, sharp enough to weaken her knees. Then anger followed. Her husband had not betrayed the mill. He had simply decided she could not be trusted with its danger. He was ill, Pike said carefully. He was frightened. So was I. Rosamund kept her voice steady. I was standing beside him. I was balancing these accounts. I was sending grain to market. Yet he borrowed in secret because he thought the truth would break me. Dominic's gaze lowered. People often conceal burdens because they believe secrecy is kindness. It is not kindness when the person left ignorant must pay the price. He looked at her then, and something in his expression suggested the words had reached farther than her marriage. Rosamund returned to the papers. A second note bore only half a date and Crowther's initials in the margin. It referred to security discussed verbally, but named no property. This is what Crowther will use, she said. He will say my husband pledged the mill. A verbal pledge cannot simply erase the written lease, Dominic said, but it can create doubt. Doubt is sometimes enough to frighten creditors and farmers. You understand that well. He accepted the implication. Yes. Pike searched the bottom of the chest and found a narrow ledger with several pages removed. On the final intact page, Rosamund's husband had written one line, Ask A.M. whether her brother retained the duplicate. Rosamund knew the initials before Pike spoke. Arabella Mowbray. Her husband's cousin arrived before dusk, as though summoned by the discovery. Her carriage stopped in the yard while the wheel shifted weakly under the partial return of water. Arabella entered the office, wearing grey silk and concern arranged as carefully as her gloves. She kissed the air near Rosamund's cheek, then glanced at Dominic with immediate disapproval. I heard you had taken in a stranger. I hired a surveyor, without references, with useful eyes. Arabella's gaze moved to the open chest. For one instant, her composure faltered. You have been reading Henry's private papers. Rosamund closed the door. You know what he borrowed. Arabella removed her gloves slowly. Only that Silas helped him during his illness. How much, I could not say. You told no one the amount. Yet yesterday you advised me that selling would cover it exactly. Arabella's fingers tightened around the gloves. Silas mentioned a figure. When? Some months ago. Before or after Henry died. Arabella looked toward the window. Rosamund, grief can make every omission look like betrayal. Answer the question. Before. The word landed quietly. Rosamund felt Pike shift behind her. Dominic remained still near the bookcase. My husband wrote that your brother retained a duplicate, Rosamund said. Duplicate of what? Arabella's face paled. A note. What kind of note? Security for the advance. Against the mill? I do not know. Against the water rights? I said I do not know. But you know enough to urge me to sell. Arabella drew herself up. I am trying to save you from humiliation. A woman alone cannot manage lawsuits, creditors, machinery, and laborers indefinitely. Henry understood that. He wanted to spare you. The old hurt sharpened. Rosamund looked at the memorandum on the desk. He wanted to spare me from knowing the truth. Crowther is now using that ignorance as leverage. You make kindness sound like an offense. Kindness without respect becomes control. Dominic's eyes moved to her face. Arabella noticed and hardened. And this man has filled your head with suspicion. This man found a hidden sluice while respected gentlemen brought me purchase agreements. He is penniless. That has not prevented him from being observant. It should prevent you from forgetting propriety. The insult was soft, almost elegant. Rosamund heard its intended destination. A widow sheltering an unknown man. A village already hungry for scandal. You came to discuss my husband's debt, she said, not my household. Arabella glanced toward the wall beside the account shelf. Rosamund followed her gaze. Her father's wooden-grain scoop hung there, but not on its usual hook. It had been placed 2 inches lower, on the peg used for spare keys. A faint smear of red clay marked the handle. Arabella looked away too quickly. Why are you staring at the scoop? Rosamund asked. I am not. You recognized that it had moved. Anyone could see it was crooked. You have not entered this office in nearly a year. Arabella's voice cooled. You are becoming unreasonable. Then, prove me wrong. Bring your brother's duplicate, note, tomorrow. He may not have it. Then bring his written statement, saying so. Arabella gathered her gloves. Sell the mill, Rosamund. Pay what is owed. Leave before this becomes uglier than it already is. You know something about how ugly it may become. Arabella opened the door. I know what society does to women who confuse defiance with strength. And I know what society does when women help men punish other women for independence. Arabella's face changed. The mask of sympathy slipped long enough to reveal anger. Then it returned. I will pray you recover your judgment. Bring the note. Arabella left without answering. Her carriage rolled away beneath the first lamps of evening. Rosamund crossed to the grain scoop and lifted it from the peg. The worn ash wood had belonged to her father before the mill became hers. A narrow line of red clay had dried inside a split near the base of the handle. Pale grit clung beneath it. Lime. Dominic came closer, but did not take the object. That was not there yesterday, Rosamund said. You are certain? I clean it myself. Who had access to this office? My husband, Mrs. Finch, Pike, Arabella. When Henry was ill, Crowther came twice to discuss accounts. Pike opened the door as Thomas hurried in from the yard, carrying a returned flour sack marked with a red chalk cross. Mrs. Hale, he said, the Carter family sent this back. They say 3 people fell ill after eating bread from it. Rosamund set the grain scoop beside the torn receipt. One object had come from the hidden bank. Another had returned from a sick household. Beyond the window, the half-starved wheel moved once under the weakened tide, and stopped again. The conspiracy was no longer only stealing water. It had begun to poison the name of Hale Mill. Rosamund did not allow the returned sack to cross the main floor. She ordered Thomas to set it on the stone inspection table near the east door, where no clean grain or flour could be touched by it. Matthew Pike closed the lower chute. The workers stopped moving. Even the half-turning wheel seemed to wait. "No one opens another sack from that batch," Rosamund said. "Seal the storage bin. Mark every order ground after yesterday's second tide. Ben, fetch Mr. Vale." The boy ran before she finished speaking. Dominic lifted the return sack by one corner and studied the cloth. "The merchant mark has been scraped away." "Can you tell what it was?" Rosamund asked. "Not yet." Pike cut the top stitching while Rosamund held a clean linen sheet beneath the opening. A sour smell rose from the grain. Several workers stepped back. Rosamund did not. She reached in with a small brass measure and drew out rye kernels darkened at the tips. Some were soft with damp, others carried a greyish bloom. "This did not happen in a dry bin," Pike said. "No," Rosamund replied, "and not in one day." Dominic picked up a length of cord from the floor. The sack had been tied with red twine. "Crowther's lower granary uses this colour," he said. Pike looked sharply at him. "So do half the carters near Belhaven. Then we prove more than colour." Rosamund separated the grain into 3 samples. One she sealed for Mr. Vale. One she placed beside flour, scraped from the returned sack. The third she kept untouched in a covered jar. "Take residue from the millstones," she told Pike, "and from the chute that handled this order." Dominic watched her mark each sample with time, batch, and witness. "You have done this before, not for spoiled grain, for disputes over weight. The principle is the same. Evidence before accusation. The words were meant for everyone in the room." Rosamund saw Dominic understand that they were also meant for him. Mr. Vale arrived within half an hour, carrying a leather case, and a face already troubled by rumour. He examined the family's symptoms from Thomas's report, then opened the grain jar. "How many are ill?" 3, Rosamund said. "A mother and 2 older children. No one else in the household ate the same loaf. Any fever? None reported. Vomiting, nausea, cramping, dizziness." Mr. Vale rolled several kernels beneath his thumb. "Spoiled rye can cause all of that. Some of these dark growths may be ergot, though. I cannot swear it without broader examination." "Could the mill create it?" Rosamund asked. "No. Milling might spread the taint through a batch, but it would begin in the grain." Relief came, but only in part. The mill had not created the danger. It had still passed the danger into bread. "Write that exactly," she said, "including what you cannot swear." Vale looked at her. "You understand Crowther will use the uncertainty. Then certainty must come from what we can prove." Pike returned with flour dust from the stones and chute. Mr. Vale found no matching grey residue in the clean machinery sample. The tainted kernels were concentrated in 4 sacks delivered during the stoppage, not in the larger rye store. They came through the east gate yesterday morning. Pike said after checking the ledger. 1 ordinary cart before 8, then an unmarked sack at 9:15. Rosamund looked toward Peter, the gate hand. "Who delivered it?" Peter's face lost colour. "A driver I didn't know, ma'am," he said. The merchant had omitted 1 sack from the early order. The wheel had stopped, and everyone was shouting. "What did the cart look like?" "Dark green. Rear wheel had 1 spoke painted white." "Did you record the driver's name?" Peter lowered his head. "No, ma'am." "Why?" He said Mr. Pike had approved it. Pike struck one palm against the table. "I did no such thing." Rosamund stopped him with a glance before anger became noise. "Peter, did you see where the cart went? Toward the lower road. Crowther's Granary Road?" "Yes, ma'am." Rosamund's gaze fell on the red twine. The conspiracy had used the mill's busiest moment with precision. Water stopped. Workers scattered. One false sack entered under borrowed authority. "Seal the 4 sacks," she said. "Move them to the old salt room. 2 keys. One with Pike, one with me. And the family?" Mrs. Finch asked from the doorway. Rosamund looked toward the office, where the silver brooch her mother had left her rested in the small drawer beside household money. There was not enough cash to replace flour for every order that might be questioned. Crowther had made sure of that by tightening credit. "They receive clean flour today," she said. "Every household from that batch does." Pike frowned. "That may be 20 sacks. Then we replace 20. We cannot afford it. We cannot afford not to." Dominic stepped closer. "I can obtain money." Rosamund looked at him. "From whom?" He hesitated. "A contact in Exeter. You have no purse, no papers, and yet you have contacts who can produce money." "Yes. At what price?" "None to you." That was the problem. Assistance without visible terms was another hidden door. Rosamund shook her head. "No. People may go hungry while pride is defended." The words were quiet, but she heard the echo of Crowther in them. Dominic heard it too. His face changed. That was unfair. "Yes, I am sorry." Rosamund opened the office drawer and removed the brooch. It was modest silver, shaped like a wheat sheaf, with one small pearl at the center. Her mother had worn it on market days. Rosamund wrapped it in cloth and gave it to Mrs. Finch. "Send Thomas to the jeweler in Belhaven. He is to take no less than £8. Mrs. Finch did not accept it immediately. "Your mother's brooch." "My mother would not ask me to keep silver while children feared bread." Dominic looked at the wrapped object, then at Rosamund. He did not offer money again. That restraint mattered more than the offer. "I will help trace the cart," he said. "Under Pike's direction, under mine," Rosamund replied. "But yes." By late afternoon, every affected household had received replacement flour and a written notice asking them not to use the earlier batch. Rosamund went herself to the Carter cottage. The mother was pale, but sitting upright. The children were frightened, not gravely ill. Rosamund apologized without hiding behind the fact that the grain had arrived spoiled. "The mill did not create the taint," she said, "but flour left my yard, and therefore the responsibility reaches me." Mrs. Carter stared at the fresh sack Thomas carried. "People say you knew. I did not." "People say Mr. Crowther warned you. He warned me that I would lose the mill. He did not warn me about grain." Rosamund placed Mr. Vale's note on the table. "You will receive the truth as soon as I have it." The woman's suspicion did not vanish, but she accepted the flour. That was enough for one afternoon. When Rosamund returned to Hale Mill, Dominic and Pike were waiting beside the east gate. They had found the dark green cart abandoned behind Crowther's lower granary. One rear wheel had a single white spoke. The driver was gone. "Crowther says the cart is used by laborers throughout the district," Pike said. "He denies knowing who drove it." Dominic held out a small wooden tally taken from beneath the cart seat. It bore a scratched number and a crescent-shaped cut. "Crowther's granary tallies are round," Rosamund said. "This one was trimmed." "To remove a mark," Dominic replied. "Not completely. Beneath the fresh cut, one carved letter remained. See." Before Rosamund could answer, Ben came running from the lane with a folded notice in his hand. "Mrs. Hale, they posted this at the church." Rosamund broke the seal. The parish vestry had suspended all purchases of flour for poor relief. and would petition the local magistrate to examine the sale of unsound grain from Hale Mill. The hearing was set for the next afternoon. At the bottom, someone had added a handwritten warning that any further illness would be laid at Rosamund's door. Pike read over her shoulder. They moved quickly. Too quickly, Dominic said. Rosamund looked from the notice to the red twine, the trimmed tally, and her father's grain scoop lying on the office table with red clay trapped in its handle. Water had been stolen. Grain had been planted. Public judgment had been arranged before either crime could be proved. She folded the notice once. Then tomorrow they will hear more than rumor. Outside, a church bell began to ring. The sound carried over the lower road, toward Crowther's granary, and back across the silent wheel of Hale Mill. Rosamund began before dawn because fear had already begun its work in the village. By 6 o'clock, 2 farmers had sent boys to retrieve grain they had planned to leave at Hale Mill. By 7, the parish baker had delayed his next order. By 8, a woman passing the gate crossed the road rather than walk beside the mill wall. Rumor had achieved in one night what Crowther's purchase agreement had not. It had made people ashamed to be seen trusting her. Rosamund stood in the mill office with the vestry notice open before her and the spoiled grain sealed in 3 jars. "We need proof the parish can understand without trusting my word," she said. Matthew Pike stood beside the ledger. Dominic waited near the window, silent, until she looked at him. "The clean milling test," he said, "and the water comparison. In that order?" "No, simultaneously. The tide establishes sabotage. The grain establishes contamination before milling." Rosamund nodded. "Mr. Greeley chooses the sacks. Mr. Vale examines them before and after. The vestry may send one witness if it wishes." Pike frowned. "The wheel cannot grind a full batch. It does not need to, only enough to prove the stones do not produce bitterness. And if the partial flow fails?" Rosamund looked toward the still wheel. "Then we explain what failed and why. We do not conceal it." Dominic's gaze rested on her face for one brief moment. He had begun to understand that truth mattered to her even when it weakened her position. That knowledge seemed to trouble him. "I will place one measuring staff at the estuary mouth," he said. "Thomas can record the race here. We set both watches to the same minute." "You have a second watch?" Pike asked. Dominic reached beneath his coat and produced a silver case worn on a plain cord. It was scratched but fine. Rosamund noticed the crest on the hinge before he turned it in his palm. "A valuable object for a penniless man," she said. "Valuable to me. Not to a pawnbroker. Less than you think." His tone closed the subject. Rosamund let it close for now. By mid-morning, Mr. Greeley arrived with the senior churchwarden and 2 sealed sacks selected from a merchant unconnected to Hale Mill. Vale brought fresh paper, glass vials, and a small loaf made from the Carter family's returned flour. The loaf had darkened unevenly. He broke it open and showed the grey flecks inside. "This is what we compare against," he said. Rosamund directed the entire process. Pike brushed the chute and lifted the top stone for inspection. Greeley examined the grooves. The churchwarden watched the grain sacks opened. Vale took samples before a single kernel entered the hopper. Dominic remained outside with Thomas until the first tide reading was due. Rosamund heard him call the time from the yard. Thomas answered from the race. The estuary had risen 5 inches. Hale Mill had gained less than 2. 15 minutes later, the difference widened. The churchwarden looked uneasy when Pike read the figures aloud. "Could silt cause that?" he asked. "The race was dredged in August," Rosamund said. "You may inspect the bed. I am no miller. then observe the water. It does not require a trade to see that the tide rises before the mill and disappears above it. Dominic entered carrying the estuary record. The loss begins after the willow bend. He placed the sheet on the table, but did not point to the hidden channel. Rosamund appreciated the restraint. The evidence needed to speak without his authority, whatever that authority truly was. The clean grain began to fall through the stones. The wheel moved unevenly, then caught enough flow to turn the shaft. Flour descended into the lined trough in a thin, pale stream. Every person in the room watched it, as though judgment itself were being ground. Mr. Vale smelled the flour and rubbed it between his fingers. Greeley tasted a small pinch. "No bitterness," he said. "Clean rye." Vale compared it with the returned flour. No grey residue, no spoiled odour. The taint was in the delivered grain. The churchwarden folded his arms. "Crowther will say, 'You prepared this display.' Then tomorrow the vestry may choose different sacks and repeat it," Rosamund replied. "I will not ask anyone to believe what they can observe." Greeley signed the statement first. Vale signed beneath him. The churchwarden hesitated, then added his name as witness to the procedure, though not yet to Rosamund's innocence. It was more than she had expected. The first proof had held. The second arrived frightened. Thomas brought the carter through the east door shortly after noon. The man was narrow-shouldered, grey at the temples, and twisting his cap hard enough to strain the cloth. He refused food. He refused a chair. His eyes kept moving toward the yard. "You drove the green cart," Rosamund said. He looked at Pike, then Dominic, then the floor. "I drove many carts." Dominic placed the trimmed tally on the table. This one had a white spoke on the rear wheel. The carter swallowed. "I don't know anything about spoiled grain." "I did not ask whether you did," Rosamund said. "I asked whether you drove it." Silence stretched. At last he nodded. "One sack only. From Crowther's lower granary to your east gate," Pike muttered under his breath. Rosamund kept her voice even. "Who paid you?" "A clerk. Young fellow named Hobb." "Did he say what was in the sack, rye?" "Said it had been left off an earlier order." "Why was the merchant mark scraped away?" "It was already gone when they gave it to me." "Did you know the sack was spoiled?" "No, ma'am." His answer came fast, desperate. "I'd never carry bad grain into a mill. I've children of my own." Rosamund believed the fear before she believed the words. "Will you state this before the vestry?" The carter's face emptied. "I can't." "Why? A man came to my lodging last night." "Crowther? I didn't see him. What did he say?" The carter's hands stopped moving. "That my wife's washing work would vanish. That no farmer between here and Belhaven would hire my cart. That if I named Crowther's clerk, people might remember other things I'd done." "Have you done other things?" Pike asked. "Nothing criminal." The man looked ashamed. "Once carried untaxed brandy. Years ago, they know." Dominic's expression changed, not with judgment, but recognition of leverage. "He will not be safe at home," he said. Rosamund turned to him. "Do not arrange anything yet." "I was going to ask." The correction was quiet. "There is an abandoned, preventive water guard cottage near the old customs path." Dominic continued. "It belongs to no private landlord. Pike's cousin knows the keeper. The carter and his wife could remain there tonight." Rosamund looked at Pike. He nodded. "Safe enough. 2 rooms?" "Sound lock." She turned back to the carter. "You will not be forced to appear tomorrow." Relief broke across his face, followed by guilt. "But I need the truth preserved." "You may write your account, Mr. Vale, and the churchwarden will witness it. If you later choose to speak, it will support you. If you do not, I will not expose your wife to punishment for your honesty. The carter stared at her. You'd let me refuse? Crowther uses fear to purchase obedience. I will not imitate him to purchase justice. Dominic looked away, as though the words had struck somewhere private. The carter sat at last. His hand shook through the first line, but steadied as he wrote. He named Hob, the lower granary, the single sack, the white-spoked cart, and the order to arrive after the wheels stopped. He signed before witnesses. Dominic arranged the cottage only after Rosamund gave permission, and he sent Thomas rather than a servant of his own. The distinction was small. Rosamund noticed it. When the carter had gone, she returned to the office and found another envelope beneath the door. The seal belonged not to the vestry, but to the local magistrate's clerk. Inside was a notice requiring her appearance the following afternoon concerning the sale of unsound flour and irregular mill records. Attached was a copy of the delivery slip for the tainted rye. Rosamund read the signature at the bottom twice. It was hers in shape, pressure, and flourish. She had never written it. Dominic came to her shoulder, but did not take the page. A forgery? He asked. Yes, a good one. Good enough to be believed before I speak. She turned the slip toward the light. Near the lower fold, almost hidden beneath a smudge, a faint seal emerged, a crown above 3 waves. Dominic went still. Rosamund felt the room change before he said a word. You know that mark, she said. His silence answered first. Then he looked at her with the expression of a man who had finally reached the edge of a lie he could no longer control. By the following afternoon, the parish vestry room had become a court in everything but name. The benches were crowded with farmers, labourers, bakers, and women who had carried Hale flour into their kitchens for years. Spoiled rye sat in a sealed jar on the long table. Beside it lay the returned loaf, the forged delivery slip, and the vestry notice suspending all parish purchases from Hale Mill. Rosamund entered with Matthew Pike, Mr. Vale, Mr. Greeley, and Dominic behind her. Conversation thinned as she passed. A mother near the aisle drew her daughter closer. One farmer removed his cap, but did not meet Rosamund's eyes. The withdrawal of trust was not loud. That made it worse. Silas Crowther stood near the senior churchwarden in a coat of sober black, his expression arranged into patient regret. Arabella Mowbray sat in the front row beneath a grey veil. A local magistrate occupied the chair at the head of the table, not to judge guilt, as he made clear at once, but to hear the parish, complaint, and consider whether any temporary restraint was required before further inquiry. The vestry will address its flour contracts and poor relief purchases, he said. I will hear evidence concerning the disputed grain and the operation of Hale Mill. Crowther bowed. No one seeks to ruin Mrs. Hale. We seek only to prevent further harm. Rosamund placed her gloves on the table. Then facts should serve you better than phrases. The churchwarden began by reading the Carter family's complaint. 3 people had eaten bread from flour ground at Hale Mill and fallen ill. Mr. Vale confirmed the symptoms, then repeated that the grain had been spoiled before it passed through the stones. Crowther listened with grave attention. You cannot prove where the spoilage began, he said. I can prove it was present in the whole kernels, Vale replied. Milling did not create it, yet the flour left Mrs. Hale's yard. Yes, Rosamund answered before anyone could shape the fact for her. That is why I replaced every sack from the affected batch before I knew whether the mill would survive the week. A murmur passed through the benches. Crowther's eyes narrowed, but only slightly. The churchwarden lifted the forged delivery slip. This record states that Mrs. Hale accepted the unmarked rye and approved its entry into the mill after the wheel stopped. He passed it to the magistrate, who examined the signature. Mrs. Hale, I did not sign it, Crowther sighed. A convenient denial. Rosamund took the paper when it was offered and held it flat. The gate ledger contains no matching entry. Mr. Pike gave no approval. Peter was told approval had already been given. The carter names Crowther's lower clerk as the man who paid him. A carter who refuses to appear, Crowther said. A carter whose wife was threatened, Rosamund replied. He gave a written statement before Mr. Vale and the senior churchwarden. The churchwarden confirmed the witnessing. Crowther turned toward the room. Then we have a frightened labourer hidden somewhere under Mrs. Hale's protection, accusing a respectable granary through a statement none of us may question. You may question the facts, Rosamund said. The dark green cart with one white spoke was found behind your lower granary. The sack was tied with red twine used there. The tally beneath the seat had been cut to remove its mark. My carts and twine are used by hired men throughout the district. Then produce the driver and explain who instructed him to arrive at 9:15, after the wheels stopped. Crowther did not answer directly. Instead, he looked toward Arabella. She rose with slow reluctance, every movement designed to appear painful. Rosamund has suffered much, she said. Her husband's illness, his death, debts she did not know existed. It is possible grief has made records and recollections difficult. Rosamund felt the intended blow land before the room fully understood it. Arabella had made widowhood sound like evidence of mental failure. My grief did not write that signature, Rosamund said, nor did it carve a false notch into the water gauge. Arabella lowered her eyes. I only ask that the parish show compassion. Compassion is not the same as calling a woman incapable while taking her property from her. A woman in the back whispered agreement. Crowther heard it and moved quickly. The issue is not womanhood. The issue is judgment. Mrs. Hale allowed an unknown man into her mill without references. She permitted him to alter the waterworks. She now relies on his measurements to claim sabotage. Every face turned toward Dominic. He stood near the wall in his worn coat, composed but visibly out of place among parish officers and landholders. Mr. Kerr, the magistrate said, what qualifications do you claim? Coastal survey work attached to the Navy, Dominic replied. Can you prove it? Not in this room. Then your evidence must stand without your reputation. It should. Rosamund looked at him. He had not tried to command belief. He had accepted the burden of proof. The magistrate turned back to her. What evidence do you offer beyond accusation? Rosamund laid out the clean milling statement. Mr. Greeley described choosing sealed sacks, watching the shoots brushed, and tasting the fresh flour. Mr. Vale confirmed that the clean grain produced clean flour. Pike presented the tide records. At the same time the estuary had risen 5 inches, Hale Mill had gained less than 2. The second reading showed an even wider loss. The water disappears after the willow bend, Rosamund said. A concealed channel diverts it into Mr. Crowther's lower meadow. Crowther smiled without warmth. An old drainage cut. An old cut would appear on an old survey. Perhaps the survey was incomplete. Rosamund placed the original lease on the table. The attached survey page was removed from this binding. The stub bears Caldemere archive marks. The room stirred at the ducal name. Dominic remained still. Crowther's confidence did not vanish, but it hardened. Mrs. Hale now claims a noble estate conspired against her. I claim only what the paper shows. The magistrate examined the binding. Do you have the missing survey? No. Then the water dispute requires formal inspection. The senior churchwarden rose. The vestry must still decide whether parish flour purchases can continue. Before the vote, Mrs. Carter entered from the rear with her oldest daughter. She walked to the table carrying a small wooden token stamped with the Hale wheat sheaf, the marker used for poor relief flour. Rosamund's chest tightened. Mrs. Carter set it down. I cannot use this again until I know my children are safe. Her voice was not cruel. That made the humiliation deeper. Rosamund met her eyes. You should not use what you do not trust. I'm sorry. Do not apologize for protecting them. Mrs. Carter returned to the benches. The token remained on the table between Rosamund and Crowther. The vestry voted to suspend all parish purchases from Hale Mill until the inquiry concluded. No one applauded. The silence felt like a door closing. The magistrate then addressed Rosamund. You may not distribute flour from the disputed batch. All such grain remains sealed. General operation may continue only if the waterworks are judged safe, but any parish contract remains suspended. Crowther stepped forward. With respect, the mill records themselves are irregular. A broader restraint is necessary. On what basis? The magistrate asked. Crowther produced another paper from his clerk's case. A statement that Mrs. Hale continued grinding after warning of illness. Pikes spoke sharply. False. You will have opportunity to answer, the magistrate said. Rosamund saw the direction of the room. Crowther would continue adding paper until doubt outweighed fact. Give me 5 days, she said. The magistrate looked at her. For what purpose? A public demonstration at Hale Mill. The vestry chooses the grain. Mr. Vale examines it. Mr. Greeley watches the grinding. An independent surveyor measures the estuary and the race. The concealed channel and boundary line are inspected before witnesses. Crowther's expression tightened. A performance arranged by the accused. Then stand beside the magistrate and watch every step. And if the mill fails, then I accept the suspension of parish trade and submit my records for full examination. Pike turned toward her in alarm. Rosamund did not look away from the magistrate. He conferred with the churchwarden and 2 vestrymen. At last he nodded. 5 days. The disputed grain remains sealed. Hale Mill may prepare for 1 witness demonstration. No parish flour order will resume before the result. Rosamund inclined her head. Agreed. The meeting began to break apart. Farmers gathered their coats. Women whispered near the door. Arabella passed Rosamund without speaking. Crowther stopped beside the table and looked at the returned flour token. 5 days will not restore confidence. No, Rosamund said. Truth will. He left with his clerk. Dominic remained by the wall until the room was nearly empty. Rosamund lifted the forged delivery slip and turned it toward the fading window light. The faint seal near the fold appeared again. A crown above 3 waves. Dominic's face changed before he could prevent it. Not surprise, recognition. You know this seal, she said. He did not answer. Rosamund stepped closer. The timber, the paper, the forged slip. Every road returns to Caldemere, and every time I ask why, you give me half a truth. His hand moved toward the inside of his coat, then stopped. Not here. You have used that silence long enough. Rosamund. It was the first time he had spoken her name without formality. The intimacy of it only sharpened her suspicion. She looked at the seal, then at the man who had signed Kerr in her office with a hand trained for finer rooms. Kershaw, she said quietly. Dominic went completely still. Outside, the church bell struck the hour, and Rosamund understood that the penniless stranger had not merely brought a secret into Hale Mill. He had brought the name stamped on the evidence being used to destroy her. Dominic did not deny the name. The omission was its own confession. Rosamund stood opposite him in the emptied vestry room, while the last voices faded beyond the door, and the church bell's final note dissolved into the damp afternoon. On the table between them lay the forged delivery slip, the copied seal, the returned flower token, and every fragment of trust she had allowed herself to place in him. "Say it plainly," she said. His hand went inside his coat. He drew out a signet ring suspended on a dark cord and laid it beside the forged paper. The gold had been dulled by use, but the design was unmistakable, a crown above 3 waves. "Dominic Kershaw," he said. "Duke of Candlelight." Rosamund had suspected connection. Steward, illegitimate relation, former officer, private agent. Not this. Not a man who could summon solicitors, servants, horses, and influence with a single note, yet had accepted 12 shillings and slept above her granary while allowing her to believe he depended on her wage. "You let me hire you. Yes, you signed a false name in my office. Kerr was my mother's family name. That does not make it yours to use as camouflage. No, you ate at my servant's table. Yes, you watched me sell my mother's brooch while knowing you could have replaced the entire affected batch without missing the money." Pain crossed his face. "I offered help, without telling me whose help it was." He had no answer. Rosamund gathered the papers and turned toward the door. "We will not do this here." They returned to Hale Mill in silence. Pike walked behind them, knowing from Rosamund's face that something had broken, but not yet what. Once inside the office, Rosamund closed the door and set the forged slip beside Dominic's ring. "Why were you here?" Dominic remained standing. "My coach overturned north of Exeter. I lost my trunk, purse, and papers. I walked toward the coast because I had been traveling to inspect irregularities connected to Caldemere surveys. You came to Devon as a duke investigating your own estate." "Yes, and then became penniless by accident. For several days. How fortunate that poverty could be put on and taken off when useful." "It was not useful. It gave you access no duke would have received. Men spoke before you. Workers ignored your rank because they did not know it. I trusted your dependence because I believed it was real." Dominic's voice lowered. "The dependence was real. For how long?" "Until you reached the nearest house and spoke your name." He looked away. That was answer enough. Rosamund felt the old wound open beneath the new one. Henry had hidden debt because he believed knowledge would burden her. Dominic had hidden power because he believed truth would obstruct him. Both men had decided what she should be allowed to know. "Tell me about the seal," she said. 5 years ago, 3 boundary disputes were traced to altered surveys prepared under Caldemere authority. Fishing families lost access to a tidal inlet. Tenant lines shifted. Elias Venn signed the revisions. Before he could be examined, he disappeared. And the copied seal. The survey office used an archive stamp for certified duplicates. It was recorded as destroyed after the inquiry. Recorded, not destroyed, by someone in your house. Possibly, you knew the timber mark from the first night. Yes, you knew the initials E. V mattered. Yes, yet you let me continue believing Crowther acted alone. I did not know how far the corruption reached, so you protected the investigation from me. Dominic flinched. I protected the evidence from anyone who might warn the person inside my estate. Including me. Including everyone. Do not make equality of suspicion sound honorable. The words struck him into silence. Rosamund moved to the window. In the yard, workers were carrying sealed grain into the old salt room. The wheel remained still. 5 days. Parish contracts gone. A forged signature bearing the crest of the man standing behind her. "What else?" she asked. Dominic did not answer at once. "Everything now." He drew a folded packet from inside his coat. "Yesterday morning, my solicitor reached me. Crowther had arranged to acquire the upstream lease through an agent." Rosamund turned. "Had arranged? I purchased it first." For one moment the room lost all sound. "You bought the land that controls my water to prevent Crowther from obtaining it. In whose name? Mine, without telling me. There was no time. There was time to prepare deeds. Rosamund, if Crowther gained the lease, he could close the channel lawfully while you challenged the transfer. Hale Mill would not survive the delay. So, you decided the safer owner was you. Temporarily, you still chose ownership over consent. I was trying to protect the mill. You were trying to control the danger." He took one step toward her, then stopped before crossing the distance she had not granted. "Yes," he said. The admission came without defense. "I believed urgency gave me the right. It did not." Rosamund had expected argument. His surrender did not ease the hurt. "My husband did the same thing," she said. "He borrowed in secret because he believed the truth would burden me. You bought my river because you believed the choice would endanger me. Different men, different power, the same decision." Dominic's face changed. "I am sorry. That sentence cannot restore equality after you have used its absence." "No. Did you ever intend to tell me before the public demonstration?" "Yes. When? When I knew whether the copied seal came from my archive and whether Arabella's sale connected Crowther to the old survey office." Rosamund caught the name. Arabella sold the lease. A narrow strip inherited through her mother gave her control over the upper bank. Crowther arranged the purchase through a London intermediary. My solicitor intercepted it. The betrayal settled with terrible clarity. Arabella had urged Rosamund to sell while privately helping Crowther gain the water that would make sale unavoidable. She knew Hale Mill depended on that stream. Yes. Did she know about the spoiled grain? I do not know. And you did not think I had the right to question her with that knowledge. I thought revealing the purchase too soon would warn Crowther. Again you decided. Dominic lowered his head. Yes. Rosamund returned to the desk and picked up the employment agreement. His elegant false signature remained beneath the terms she had written. 7 days, no unauthorized changes, no orders issued in her name, no concealed danger. He had violated the spirit of every line while obeying enough of the wording to remain near her. She tore the paper once, not in anger, but with finality. Your employment at Hale Mill is ended. Dominic went still. I understand. You will leave the room above the granary before dark. Yes, you will not send men to guard the mill, question my workers, inspect my records, or enter my land without my permission. Agreed, you will give me every survey copy, every letter from Exeter, the upstream deed, and every document bearing the Caldemere seal. You will have them. Now. He placed the packet on the desk. It was already prepared. That hurt in a different way. He had anticipated confession as one more controlled event. Rosamund opened the packet. Inside lay archive copies, correspondence, the upstream deed, and a list of Caldemere employees with access to the old seal. The deed remains in my name, Dominic said. I will transfer it wherever you direct. You will do nothing with it until I understand what has been done. Then I will do nothing. Rosamund looked at the signet ring, still lying beside the forged slip. Take that. Keep it. I do not want your crest. It may prove the seal on the slip was copied from my house. You are giving me evidence against yourself. I am giving you what should have been yours before I asked for trust." For one suspended moment, she saw both men, the hungry stranger who had saved Ben, eaten without complaint, and asked permission before protecting a frightened Carter, the Duke who had bought her water while speaking of partnership. She could not separate them. That was the deepest injury. "Go," she said. Dominic picked up nothing except the cord that had held his ring. At the door, he paused. "What I felt for you was not part of the investigation." Rosamund's breath caught, but she refused to let the confession change the ground beneath them. "You had no right to ask me to believe feelings from a man whose life I did not know. The man was real. The choice was not." He closed his eyes briefly. "You are right." Then he left. By dusk, a Caldermere carriage arrived at the coast road. A footman in ducal livery addressed Dominic as Your Grace within earshot of 2 farm boys. The story crossed the village before the carriage wheels were gone. Rosamund Hale had sheltered a duke under a false name. She had hired him, fed him, and allowed him into her mill. By nightfall, rumor claimed she had invented the poisoned flower scandal to force his protection. Matthew Pike brought the final blow after supper. Crowther had petitioned the magistrate for temporary control of Hale Mill's records and waterworks, arguing that Rosamund's secret alliance with Caldermere made every piece of evidence suspect. Rosamund stood alone in the office with Dominic's signet, the deed to her stolen river, and the grain scoop marked by red clay. 5 days had become one night. Crowther had lost his concealment, but he had found a more dangerous weapon. He had made the truth look like scandal. Rosamund did not wait for Crowther's petition to become an order. Before sunrise, she carried Dominic's packet, her father's wooden grain scoop, the torn receipt, and the old tied ledger into the office and locked the door behind her. The mill yard outside was quiet. No farmer had arrived. No cart stood at the gate. Crowther's rumor had emptied Hale Mill more effectively than the broken water race. Rosamund placed the grain scoop beneath the lamp. Red clay remained inside the split near the handle. Pale lime dust clung beneath it. The same mixture had packed the concealed bank. Someone had carried the scoop upstream, used it near the hidden channel, then returned it to the office. The question was why. Matthew Pike arrived first, followed by Thomas Bell and Mrs. Finch. Rosamund showed them the handle. "Who touched this during Henry's illness?" she asked. Pike shook his head. "I never used it outside the grain room," Thomas answered next. "Peter used the brass measures. Not that one." Mrs. Finch studied the worn wood. Mrs. Mowbray helped sort papers twice when Mr. Hale could no longer sit at the desk. Mr. Crowther came on both days. Rosamund looked at the clay. Then one of them knew the scoop could leave this room without attracting notice. Pike frowned. A scoop is a poor tool for digging, not for removing loose soil from a narrow space. Rosamund wrapped the object in cloth. "We are going upstream." "Crowther may have men watching," Thomas said. "Then they may watch 4 witnesses find what he buried." They reached the concealed channel while the tide was low. Mist hung over the meadow, but the cut through the reeds was plainly visible now. Rosamund followed the red clay bank beyond the second sluice. The flood had not yet disturbed it. Near the place where the boundary stones should have stood, the ground sank in 2 shallow lines. She knelt and pressed the scoop handle into one. The curve fit a scraped groove beneath the grass. "Here," she said. Pike drove the iron probe into the bank. At less than 2 feet, it struck stone. Thomas began to dig while Mrs. Finch stood above them with the ledger wrapped beneath her cloak. They removed the soil carefully. The first boundary stone lay on its side, the old Hale wheat mark packed with clay. Several feet beyond it, the probe struck another. Beneath the second stone, Thomas found a strip of red twine and a small metal tally cut into the shape of a crescent. One letter remained beneath the filed edge. See, the same trimming as the tally recovered from the abandoned green cart. Rosamund's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to continue methodically. "Do not move the stone yet, Mrs. Finch. Mark the position. Thomas, measure from the willow trunk." Beneath the tally lay a packet wrapped in waxed cloth. The outer layer had darkened, but the paper within remained dry. Rosamund opened it. The first fragment was the missing continuation of Crowther's receipt. Advance against mill wages and physician's accounts. Her husband's signature appeared below. No mention of water rights, no pledge of Hale Mill, no transfer. Relief moved through her with such force that she had to sit back on her heels. Henry had not sold the river, yet beneath the receipt lay a note in his hand. Rosamund read it silently. "Crowther has agreed to delay collection until winter contracts. I have not told Rose. She has carried enough. If I recover, I will explain. If I do not, Arabella knows where the duplicate lies." The words blurred for one moment. Henry had tried to save the workers and pay the physician. He had not betrayed the mill. He had still decided she could not bear the truth. Mrs. Finch touched Rosamund's shoulder. "He loved you." "Yes." Rosamund folded the note carefully, and he was wrong. Pike lowered his head. He thought silence was protection. Silence gave Crowther a weapon. She looked at the buried stone. "I will not make the same mistake with anyone who depends on me." Thomas found one final paper beneath the waxed cloth. It carried instructions to admit an unmarked sack during the first stoppage of the wheel. The writer had ordered the driver to use the east gate and claim Pike's approval. The signature had been removed, but the paper bore the same Culdamere watermark as the forged slip. 3 schemes were no longer separate. The stolen water created panic. The tainted grain created illness. The forged papers made Rosamund appear responsible. "Take the stones to the mill yard," she said. "In daylight, let the village see them arrive." Pike hesitated. "Crowther will know. He already knows we are close." Rosamund tucked Henry's note inside her dress. What he does next may prove more than what he has done before. By late morning, the recovered stones stood in the center of Hale Mill yard. Rosamund sent copies of the receipt and instruction fragment to the magistrate, with Thomas and Mrs. Finch as witnesses. Then she ordered the mill carriage. Pike looked toward the north road. "Culdamere Lodge?" "Yes." "Will you ask the Duke for help?" "No. I will tell him the terms under which he may offer it." Dominic received her in the morning room without ducal ceremony. He wore a plain dark coat, but the room revealed what his disguise had hidden. Servants obeyed before he spoke. Estate maps covered one wall. A silver dispatch box bearing the Culdamere crest stood open on the table. Rosamund remained near the door until Mrs. Finch and Pike entered behind her. Dominic's gaze moved from the wrapped grain scoop to the clay on Pike's boots. "You found the stones, 2 of them. Perhaps more remain." Rosamund placed the recovered papers on the table. "We also found the full receipt. My husband borrowed for wages and physician's accounts. He did not pledge the water rights." Dominic read the line, then looked at her. "I am glad. Do not turn his secrecy into innocence. I would not. He loved me. He also decided truth was his burden to manage. That mistake outlived him." Dominic accepted the rebuke as partly his own. "What do you require?" The question was different from an offer. Rosamund noticed. "Every interest you hold in the upstream lease must be disclosed in writing. You will execute a covenant preventing sale, transfer, alteration, or enforcement while this inquiry continues. The deed will be deposited with 2 trustees who do not serve House Kershaw. One chosen by you, one chosen by me." Dominic nodded. "Agreed. You will provide all correspondence relating to Elias Venn, the old archive seal, Arabella's sale, and Crowther's agent. No selected extracts. All correspondence. You will not send guards, question my workers, or enter Hale land without notice." "Agreed. And if you conceal one material fact, our cooperation ends." Dominic's eyes held hers. "Agreed." Rosamund placed the forged instruction before him. "Then begin now. What does this paper tell you?" He examined the watermark and the tiny registration punctures along the edge. It came from the old Caldemere survey office. The registry pattern belongs to Elias Venn's final year. "Can you prove that?" "The archive ledger in Exeter can." "Then obtain the ledger, not merely a letter describing it." "I will." He reached for a bell, then stopped before touching it. "May I summon my solicitor to witness the covenant?" Yes, the pause was small, but it mattered. Dominic lowered his hand. "There is another matter." Rosamund waited. "One of Crowther's intercepted letters refers to a final release at springtide. I believed it meant closing the diversion permanently after he acquired the lease." His expression tightened. "Now, I think it means opening the upper gate to wash away the buried evidence." Pike looked toward the window. "The strongest tide is tomorrow night." "It may come sooner if wind drives the estuary," Dominic said. Rosamund felt the pieces align. Crowther knew the stones were exposed. He knew the magistrate would inspect them. If the bank failed, he could claim the markers had shifted in the flood. "Why was this not in the packet?" she asked. It was. A sealed sheet marked urgent. Rosamund remembered the page she had set aside unopened after discovering the deed. Anger rose, but not only at him. "Then I judged before reading everything." "You had reason. Reason does not make error impossible." Dominic's face softened, but he did not use the admission to seek forgiveness. The solicitor entered. Dominic dictated the covenant exactly as Rosamund required. He named one trustee from Exeter and allowed her to name Mr. Vale's brother, a retired attorney in Belhaven, as the second. He signed his full name and title. Rosamund read every line before adding hers beneath the notice clause. The ink had barely dried when the morning room door opened without ceremony. Ben Coyle stood there soaked to the knees, breathing hard from the ride. "Mrs. Hale," he gasped. "Mr. Pike, they've opened the upper gate. Water's coming down fast." Dominic looked at Rosamund, but did not move first. "What do you need?" he asked. Rosamund gathered the covenant, the grain scoop, and Henry's note. "The carriage," she said, "and this time, Your Grace, you follow my orders." The carriage had barely cleared the Caldemere drive before the sound of water reached them. It rolled across the fields like distant thunder, too deep and too steady for ordinary tide. Dominic took the reins because his horses were faster and better trained than Hale Mill's old mare, but he did not choose the road. Rosamund did. "Take the lower bridge," she said. "The upper lane will flood first." Dominic turned without question. Pike rode behind them on a borrowed gelding. Mrs. Finch remained at the lodge to send the signed covenant toward Belhaven and Exeter with separate messengers. Ben Coyle clung to the rear step, soaked through and pale from the ride. "How long ago did the gate open?" Rosamund called over the noise of the wheels. Not 10 minutes before I left, ma'am. Thomas saw the upper race jump all at once. Anyone near the sluice. A cart went north before dawn. Dark cover, no crest. Dominic looked toward her. Crowther's men may still be there. Then they will leave when they see witnesses coming, and if they do not, we protect the mill first. The magistrate can protect his questions later. The carriage crested the final rise. Below them, Hale Mill sat beside a widening sheet of brown water. The diverted channel had become a rushing cut across the meadow. Water struck the lawful race from the wrong angle, forcing the current against the wheel pit. Men moved through the yard, carrying grain sacks toward the upper loft. The wheel turned too fast, then caught, then lurched again with a groan that carried up the hill. Rosamund felt every sound in her chest. "The lower gate is still shut," she said. "Pressure has nowhere to go." Dominic drew the horses to a stop before the flooded stones. He stepped down first, then turned as if to help her. His hand paused in the air. Rosamund placed her own hand in it because this was not the hour to punish him with needless distance. He steadied her to the ground and released her at once. "Pike," she called, "move every sack from the lower store. Thomas and Peter to the Spill Meadow gate. Ben, get the younger boys into the office and count them twice. No one crosses the west walkway." Her orders traveled through the yard. Workers responded before fear could scatter them. Dominic stood at her shoulder, wet wind flattening his coat against him. "What do you need?" he asked. The lower release opened, the inner sluice controlled by half-turns. No one on the outer bank. "The service platform is already taking water. I know the boards, you do not." "Then I follow you." Rosamund looked at him. "You do exactly what I say." Yes. They entered the wheelhouse through the east door. Water covered the lower floor by several inches and climbed visibly along the stone wall. The great wheel struck the race with uneven force, spraying through the open frame. Rosamund descended the service steps with one hand on the rail. The platform trembled beneath her boots. Dominic followed one pace behind. He did not reach for her. At the release chain, Rosamund pulled. The mechanism held fast. She pulled again and felt the lower assembly jerk without moving. "The guide link has twisted," she said. Dominic leaned close enough to see without taking her place. "Can it be freed?" "Not while the wheel bears this much pressure." She pointed toward the inner sluice lever on the wall beyond the crossbeam. "That opens into the spill meadow." Dominic measured the distance. "The third iron foothold is loose." Rosamund looked at him sharply. "How do you know?" "I saw it during the first inspection." "Then use the wall, not the beam. One turn only." He climbed toward the lever, keeping his weight against the stone. Water struck the structure below him. Rosamund watched each movement, not because he was a duke, but because men could still be lost to tide whatever title they carried. Dominic reached the lever and looked back. "Now," one turn, he pulled. The iron bar resisted, then shifted with a heavy knock. A narrow rush opened toward the meadow. The pressure against the wheel eased by a fraction. Rosamund tested the chain. It moved 2 links and caught again. Another half turn. Dominic obeyed. The spill channel widened. Water surged through the meadow gate outside, and the wheel's rhythm changed from violent to merely dangerous. Rosamund braced both feet and hauled the chain downward. The twisted link scraped against the guide. A crack sounded overhead. One of the support braces had split along the grain. Dominic turned. "Rosamund, the beam is going." "Not yet. We have seconds. Then do not waste them." She drew the short iron bar from the tool rack and wedged it beneath the caught link. "Hold the chain above me. Do not pull until I say." Dominic came down from the wall and took the chain in both hands. His shoulder pressed near hers, but he kept his weight away from her body. Rosamund forced the bar downward. The link shifted 1 inch. Water struck the gate harder. Now, Dominic pulled. The chain dropped. The lower release opened with a deep metallic clang, and a broad surge escaped into the spill meadow. The sudden movement threw Rosamund sideways. Dominic caught her by the upper arms before she struck the rail. He held only long enough to steady her. "Are you hurt?" No. Another crack sounded above. Out. This time, Rosamund did not argue. They climbed the steps together as the damaged brace settled against the wall. In the yard, the water had stopped rising, but shouting came from the lower storage door. A grain bin had shifted when the floor flooded, trapping one of the workers between its corner and the wall post. Pike and Thomas were trying to move it. "Stop," Rosamund called. "The upper bin is resting on the brace." Pike froze. The trapped man stood waist-deep in water, frightened but conscious. Rosamund studied the angle. "Use the loading bar beneath the left corner. Lift no more than 3 inches. Slide him toward the stairs." Dominic took the iron bar from Thomas. "Here, farther left, under the iron band." He set it exactly where she pointed. Pike and Thomas added their weight. The bin rose enough for the worker to turn sideways and crawl free. Dominic lowered it slowly before the brace could shift. "Upper loft," Rosamund told the man. "Mr. Vale will examine you when this is over." Outside, the diverted water still tore through the red clay bank. The flood had stripped away the reeds and exposed the concealed channel from the Willow Bend to Crowther's meadow. Rosamund crossed the yard to higher ground. Dominic followed. A section of bank gave way with a low roar. Mud rolled into the current. Something pale struck a root and stopped. Then another shape surfaced farther downstream. "Boundary stones," Pike said. Thomas tied a rope around his waist and waded into the shallow edge while 2 men held the line. He reached the first stone and looped the rope around it. Together they dragged it onto firm ground. Mud covered the face, but the Hale wheat mark showed beneath Rosamund's sleeve when she wiped it clean. The second stone had cracked along one side. Elias Venn's initials remained visible below the old boundary line. Behind it, a third marker appeared, then a fourth, each buried along the false channel. Crowther had not moved one boundary. He had erased an entire line. Dominic crouched beside the cracked stone. "The chisel marks are recent. They tried to remove Venn's initials," Rosamund said, and failed. A covered cart stood on the upper road for one moment, then turned when the driver saw the workers recovering the stones. Pike pointed. "That will carry word to Crowther." "Let it," Rosamund said. He wanted the tide to bury evidence. Instead, it has made witnesses of every man in this yard. By late afternoon, the flood had begun to recede. The grain remained dry in the upper loft. The wheel axle had held. The injured worker rested near the office stove with a wrapped ankle. 4 recovered boundary stones stood in a row where every visitor to Hale Mill would see them. Rosamund found Dominic beneath the eaves, binding a shallow cut across his palm with a strip of cloth. "You did not mention that," she said. "It is nothing." That answer was unconvincing when I used it, and no better from you. She took the cloth from him and tied it more securely. Dominic watched her hands, but did not move closer. When the beam cracked, he said, "I wanted to carry you out. I know. I also knew you had judged the mechanism correctly. You were afraid." "Yes." The admission came without shame. Fear does not always make authority wiser. Rosamund finished the knot. "You followed my orders." They were the right orders. That has never stopped powerful men from replacing them with their own. His expression tightened. I am trying not to be that man. Trying is not proof. No. He looked toward the recovered stones. Today may be one piece. Before Rosamund could answer, a mounted messenger entered the yard bearing the magistrate's seal. The public inspection had been moved to the following morning. The magistrate, vestry officers, bakers, survey witnesses, and all parties claiming an interest in the watercourse were ordered to attend Hale Mill. Rosamund read the notice once and handed it to Dominic. Beyond them, the exposed channel cut across the meadow in plain sight, and the old boundary stones stood upright again. Tomorrow, she said, the river speaks before everyone. Before sunrise, Rosamund arranged the evidence in 3 separate rows across the long mill table. The first row held the tide ledger, the altered oak gauge, and Dominic's measurements from the estuary. The second held the recovered boundary stones, the original lease, the missing survey fragment, and Elias Venn's initials copied from the buried markers. The third held the spoiled rye, the red twine, the trimmed granary tally, the forged delivery slip, and the carter's statement. Water, boundary, grain, 3 lies, each supporting the next. If we present everything at once, Crowther will call it confusion, Rosamund said. Then we make him answer one chain before moving to the next. Matthew Pike stood beside the wheelhouse plan. Thomas Bell checked the lower sluice. Mr. Vale had sent word that he would arrive with fresh sample jars before 8. Dominic remained near the office doorway until Rosamund looked at him. He had come without liveried servants and without the Caldermere carriage. Only a solicitor and an older naval surveyor waited outside. Captain Ames, Dominic said, he has no connection to my estate. The magistrate's clerk will pay his expenses. Rosamund studied the older man through the window. He carried a brass level, a sounding line, and the weathered patience of someone accustomed to tides, ignoring human arguments. Did you tell him what conclusion to expect? No. Did you tell him Crowther diverted the race? Only that a disputed channel exists. Then he may inspect. Dominic inclined his head. The sealed grain? The vestry chooses it this morning. Mr. Greeley watches the sacks opened. Mr. Vale examines the kernels before grinding. And the wheel? Pike asked. The flood strained the lower hinge. Rosamund pointed to the sequence written on her slate. We close the diversion gate first. We let the lawful race fill. Then we open the inner sluice by half turns. No one touches the release chain except me. Dominic's gaze moved toward the damaged platform. He said nothing. Rosamund noticed the restraint. You may inspect the hinge with Pike, she added. No alteration without telling me. Agreed. Pike led Dominic into the wheelhouse. They returned several minutes later. The hinge will hold one controlled run, Pike said. Dominic added only, I agree. That small surrender of emphasis pleased Rosamund more than a speech would have. The solicitor entered carrying 2 identical deeds, and the covenant drafted the day before. Dominic placed them on the table. The upstream lease will remain deposited with Mr. Harcourt in Exeter and Mr. Vale's brother in Belhaven. I cannot sell, transfer, alter, or enforce any right under it while the inquiry continues. Any notice must be served upon both trustees and upon you. Rosamund read every clause. Add that no work may be ordered on the upper bank without my written consent. The solicitor glanced toward Dominic. Dominic did not look at him. Add it. The clause was inserted. Rosamund read the page again. Only then did she sign the notice provision. Dominic signed beneath her with his full name and title. He did not explain why the act mattered. He simply surrendered the control he had taken. Outside, workers raised the 4 recovered boundary stones in a line beside the yard gate. Their pale faces still carried mud from the flood. Each one showed the old Hale wheat mark. The third bore Elias Venn's initials beneath chisel scars. Captain Ames examined the stones without comment, then walked the channel with Pike. Rosamund watched Dominic remain at the edge of the yard, answering no question, unless Captain Ames asked him directly. For the first time since his identity had been revealed, his rank seemed to occupy less space than his conduct. A carriage arrived shortly after 7. Arabella Mowbray descended alone. She wore deep blue rather than morning grey, and her face lacked the practiced softness she had brought before. "I must speak with you privately," she said. "No," Rosamund replied. "You may speak before Mrs. Finch and Mr. Vale's clerk." Arabella glanced toward Dominic. "This concerns family. Family has already entered the magistrate's record. Rosamund, do not be cruel. Cruelty would be forcing you to speak without choice. I am giving you one." Rosamund led her into the office. Mrs. Finch closed the door. The clerk sat at the side table with pen and paper. Dominic remained outside. Rosamund placed the full receipt before Arabella. "Henry borrowed for wages and physician's accounts. You knew." Arabella's face tightened. "He asked me not to alarm you. He asked you to keep me ignorant. He was dying, and still paying men who depended on the mill. I would have understood that. He did not believe you should carry more. You used his mistake to convince me I was unfit." Arabella looked away. Rosamund laid out the sale agreement for the upstream strip. "You sold this knowing Crowther's agent wanted it. I believed the mill was failing. You helped it fail. I did not open the sluice. You sold the ground beneath it." Arabella's hands closed around the back of the chair. "I wanted you free of the mill. No, you wanted me free of the authority it gave me." The words landed without raised voice. Arabella's composure broke at the edges. "You were becoming impossible. Henry indulged you. The workers obeyed you. People began saying you understood the business better than men who had inherited land. And that offended you. It endangered you. It embarrassed you." Silence answered. Rosamund placed a blank sheet before her. "You have 2 choices. Write what you know now, before witnesses, or answer the same questions tomorrow before the magistrate and the parish." Arabella stared at the paper. "Will you protect me from scandal?" "No. We are family." "Then you should have treated my ruin as more than a convenient solution." Arabella's eyes filled, but Rosamund did not soften. Tears were not truth. "Did Crowther alter the water gauge?" she asked. "Yes." "When? 2 weeks ago. Who did it?" "A carpenter from Belhaven. Crowther's clerk paid him." "Did you see it?" "I saw the staff afterward." Crowther said the new mark would make the lower level appear ordinary. The clerk began writing. Rosamund continued. "Did you know about the tainted grain?" "No." The answer came sharply. "I knew he meant to stop parish purchases. I thought he would use debt and the water. I did not know he would risk children." "Did you know the forged signature would be used?" Arabella hesitated. "I knew a delivery paper existed. I did not see it until the vestry." "What did you know about the Caldemere seal?" "Only that Crowther's agent claimed old estate papers could make his map appear lawful." Rosamund watched her carefully. "Anything else?" Arabella lowered her voice. "The gauge. You have already admitted that. There is another notch." Rosamund went still. "Where?" "Lower than the false mark you found. Very shallow. It was cut yesterday. Why?" Crowther said if the demonstration restored water, the new line would make the mill appear dangerously high, as though you had forced the race beyond its safe level. Mrs. Finch inhaled sharply. The plan was simple and effective. If the wheel failed, Rosamund was incompetent. If the water rose, Crowther would claim she had flooded the race by tampering with the gates. "Who cut it?" Rosamund asked. "Hob, Crowther's clerk." "Did he enter the yard?" "He bribed one of the night carters to leave the staff near the lane. It was returned before dawn." Rosamund remembered the gauge had been moved during the flood. She had assumed Pike had relocated it for safety. "Write everything," she said. Arabella sat. Her first lines shook. The later ones steadied. She admitted the lease sale. Crowther's plan to break Hale Mill through debt and water loss, the altered gauge, Henry's wage advance, and her own attempts to pressure Rosamund into selling. When she finished, she signed before Mrs. Finch and the clerk. "Will you forgive me?" she asked. Rosamund looked at the woman who had wrapped contempt in concern and called it family duty. "Not because you confessed when silence became dangerous." Arabella flinched. "Then there is nothing left between us. There is truth. It is more than you left me yesterday." Arabella rose. At the door, Rosamund stopped her. "Your statement will be read accurately. I will not permit Crowther to blame you for acts you did not know about." Arabella turned, surprised. "Why?" "Because justice is not revenge." She left without another word. Rosamund carried the statement into the yard. Dominic looked at her but waited. "Crowther cut a second false notch," she said. "He means to claim the restored level is unsafe." Pike brought the gauge staff from the tool room. Under angled morning light, the shallow new line appeared below the first false mark. Fresh oak showed beneath rubbed mud. Captain Ames examined it and said, "Then we use neither false notch. We set the lawful level from the old tide ledger, the stone race marks, and independent measurement." Rosamund nodded. "Exactly." The first villagers began arriving. Farmers stood near the gate. Bakers gathered beside the sealed grain. The magistrate's carriage appeared on the lower road. Beyond the meadow, the tide had begun to rise. Dominic came to Rosamund's side, but did not step ahead. "What do you need from me?" he asked. She handed him Arabella's statement. "Read only when the magistrate asks. Until then, let the mill speak." By 9 o'clock, the mill yard held nearly everyone who had doubted Rosamund and everyone who still depended on her. The magistrate stood beside the long evidence table with the senior churchwarden, 2 vestrymen, Captain Ames, Mr. Vale, Mr. Greeley, and Dominic's solicitor. Farmers crowded near the granary wall. Bakers gathered around the sealed grain sacks chosen that morning. Women from the village stood along the lane, some with flower tokens in their hands, others with children beside them. The 4 recovered boundary stones rose near the gate like witnesses dragged from the earth. Silas Crowther arrived last. His clerk, Hob, carried a leather case. Crowther's face remained composed until he saw Arabella's signed statement beside the forged delivery slip. Then his expression hardened. "Before this spectacle begins," he said, "I object to the influence of His Grace. Every paper, witness, and measurement may have been arranged to favor Mrs. Hale." The magistrate looked toward Dominic. "Your Grace?" Dominic remained at the edge of the yard. "The surveyor is independent. The grain was chosen by the vestry. The carter's statement was witnessed before my identity was known. The recovered stones were found by mill workers during the flood. I have deposited the upstream deed with 2 trustees and bound myself not to enforce it." His solicitor produced the covenant. The magistrate reviewed it, then set it with the other documents. "The objection is noted. The inspection will proceed. Rosamund stepped to the first row of evidence. We begin with the water. Captain Ames carried one watch to the estuary stake. Thomas Bell kept the second beside the Hale race. Both had been set to the same minute. Pike stood at the concealed gate with 2 witnesses. At the first reading, the estuary had risen 6 inches. The mill race had risen less than 2. At the second, the difference widened. Captain Ames called the figures from the lower path. Thomas repeated his. Rosamund marked both on the slate. The tide is entering the creek normally, she said. The loss begins above the willow bend. Crowther lifted his voice. Or the race is choked by neglect. Captain Ames returned and lowered a weighted line into the channel. The bed is clear. The water is leaving through the artificial cut. Drainage, Crowther said. Lawful improvement. Rosamund held up the oak gauge staff, then explained why 2 false notches were cut to make the altered level appear ordinary. Hobb looked toward Crowther before catching himself. Arabella's statement was read aloud. She named Crowther's order, the Bellhaven carpenter, and the second shallow notch cut the previous day. Captain Ames compared the staff with the old tide ledger and the stone marks along the race wall. Neither recent notch corresponds to the historic safe level, he said. The true autumn level is here. He indicated the older line cut by Rosamund's father. The magistrate turned to Pike. Close the diversion gate. Pike and Thomas lowered it by inches. Water changed direction slowly, then with visible force. The Hale race began to fill. 2 inches, 4, 7. It reached the old lawful mark and held. The crowd shifted. The stolen water had returned without flooding the wall. Crowther's first lie had failed. Rosamund moved to the second proof. Captain Ames cleaned the recovered stones with water and a stiff brush. The Hale wheat mark emerged on each face. On the third stone, Elias Venn's initials remained below a line of chisel scars. Rosamund opened the original lease. The water right extends from the willow bend to the sea wall. The attached survey page was cut from this binding. Dominic's solicitor placed the Caldermere archive copy beside it. The old map showed the same 4 stones in their original positions. Crowther's newer map moved the boundary downstream and labeled the hidden channel as established drainage. Captain Ames compared the measurements. The newer map cannot be accurate. The stone spacing, bank angle, and tidal course all contradict it. Crowther smiled without warmth. The Duke's archive proves what the Duke wishes. Dominic spoke only when the magistrate looked toward him. Elias Venn's authority was withdrawn 5 years ago after altered coastal surveys were discovered. The registry punctures on Crowther's map belong to Venn's final year, but the certification date is later than his authority. Hobb's face had gone pale. The magistrate ordered the disputed map placed under seal. "The stones?" he asked. Thomas described finding them during the flood. Pike and 3 workers confirmed the sequence. Rosamund added the red clay and crushed lime found in the packed bank. "The flood did not move the stones into the channel," she said. "It stripped away the earth used to hide them." Crowther's second lie had failed. Rosamund turned to the third row. The spoiled rye, red twine, trimmed tally, forged slip, and Carter's statement waited there. Mr. Vale examined the whole kernels and repeated that the spoilage existed before milling. Mr. Greeley described the clean test conducted under witnesses. The churchwarden confirmed that he had watched the sacks opened and the flour produced. Rosamund placed the trimmed tally beside the crescent-shaped token found beneath the buried stone. Their cut edges matched. "One came from the abandoned green cart," she said. The other lay with the forged instruction beneath the boundary marker. The magistrate looked at Hob. "Did you pay the carter?" Hob's lips parted, but Crowther answered first. "My clerk paid many labourers." "Did you order an unmarked sack admitted after the wheels stopped?" the magistrate asked. Hob looked at Crowther again. Rosamund saw fear move through him. "You may answer now," she said, "or answer after the papers have answered for you." Crowther rounded on her. "You are not the magistrate. No, I am the woman whose name you forged." The forged delivery slip was held to the light. The copied Caldemere seal appeared near the fold. Dominic's signet and archive stamp impressions were compared. The resemblance was clear, but the copied mark lacked one fine line beneath the third wave. His solicitor explained that the old survey office stamp had carried that defect. "The seal proves no act by Mr. Crowther," Crowther said. "It proves only that Caldemere's records were poorly guarded." "That failure is mine," Dominic said. "The use of the stolen stamp is not." Rosamund nodded to Pike. "Bring the sealed grain." The vestryman broke the wax. Mr. Vale examined the kernels. Mr. Greeley confirmed the sacks were those chosen that morning. The clean grain entered the hopper. Pike opened the chute. Rosamund stepped onto the service platform and placed one hand on the inner sluice lever. "Half turn," she called. Thomas obeyed. Water pressed against the wheel, but the paddles did not move. A whisper passed through the yard. Crowther's mouth curved. "There is your truth. The mill is dead." Rosamund listened to the mechanism. The lower release chain had settled against the guide after the flood. She could hear the strain, but not the motion. Another half turn. The water rose to the old safe mark. Still the wheel held. Dominic moved one step forward, then stopped. "What do you need?" he asked. "The short iron bar." He brought it and placed it within her reach. Rosamund wedged it beneath the court link. "Pike, hold the upper chain. No one else touches it." She pressed down. The iron resisted. Her injured wrist burned, but she did not release the bar. Now Pike pulled. The link shifted with a sharp metallic knock. The lower gate opened. Water surged beneath the wheel. One paddle dipped, then another. The great wheel turned with a deep wooden groan that traveled through the mill floor and into the yard. Belts tightened. The main shaft caught. Flour dust trembled from the beams. The mill was alive. Rosamund did not look at the crowd. "Open the grain." The clean rye fell through the stones. Fresh flour descended into the linen-lined trough, pale and warm. Mr. Vale examined it. Mr. Greeley rubbed it between his fingers and tasted a pinch. "Clean," he said. "No bitterness." A second baker confirmed it. The churchwarden stared at the moving wheel, then at the spoiled sample on the evidence table. The contrast required no speech. Crowther stepped forward. A prepared demonstration under the protection of a duke proves nothing about the original batch. Rosamund faced him. The original batch contained spoiled kernels before milling. Your cart delivered the unmarked sack. Your clerk paid the driver. Your tally was buried with the instruction. Your altered channel stopped the wheel at the exact hour the sack arrived. Your false paper placed my signature beneath your lie. You cannot prove I gave the order. Hob spoke before Crowther could stop him. He did. The yard went silent. Hob's voice shook. "Mr." Crowther said the mill had to appear unsafe before the debt was called. He gave me the old seal. He told me to use Mrs. Hale's signature from a receipt. Crowther turned on him. "You fool. I won't carry it alone." Hob pointed toward the spoiled rye. "I didn't know children would eat it," he said. "The sack would be discovered before grinding." The confession broke the last defense. The magistrate ordered Crowther and Hob held for examination concerning forged instruments, malicious damage, interference with the watercourse, and adulterated grain. Crowther looked toward Dominic. "This is your victory." Dominic did not move. "No." He looked at Rosamund. "It is hers." Rosamund stepped between the evidence table and the turning wheel. His Grace found one mark. "My workers found the channel. My records proved the tide. My father's stones proved the boundary. My mill proved the flour." "You did not underestimate a duke, Mr. Crowther. You underestimated the woman whose mill you tried to steal." The senior churchwarden removed the suspension notice from the table. "The vestry restores parish flour purchases from Hale Mill, subject to ordinary inspection." He picked up the wooden flour token. Mrs. Carter had returned. She came forward from the crowd and took it back herself. "My children need bread tomorrow," she said. Rosamund placed clean flour into her hands. "They will have it." Farmers began carrying sacks toward the loading platform. Bakers asked Pike when the next batch could begin. Trust returned not through applause, but through work. Dominic remained apart until Rosamund approached him. His face held relief, regret, and something he did not try to name. "The signet remains evidence," he said. "Keep it as long as needed." Rosamund lifted her father's wooden grain scoop from the table. Red clay still marked the split in its handle. She placed it in Dominic's hands. He received it carefully. "Come tomorrow," she said, without disguise. Dominic returned the next morning without a crest on his carriage, without liveried servants, and without the authority that had once entered every room before him. He came on horseback in a plain dark coat, carrying Rosamund's father's wooden grain scoop, wrapped in clean linen. Peter opened the gate after looking toward the office window for permission. Dominic waited there until Rosamund stepped outside. The mill wheel turned rhythm, and the first ordinary grain carts had begun to return. "You ask me to come without disguise," he said. "So I have." Rosamund looked at the plain coat, the worn boots, and the man who could never again be mistaken for powerless. A duke remains a duke even when he dresses simply. Yes, and an apology does not become proof because it is sincere. No. He held out the wrapped scoop. "I cleaned only the loose mud. I left the red clay in the split because it may still be required as evidence." Rosamund accepted it. "You remembered." "I am trying to remember everything I once believed was mine to decide." She did not answer. Instead, she led him into the office. The forged slip, tied records, and Caldermere signet had already been taken under seal by the magistrate's clerk. In their place lay fresh contracts, returned flour tokens, and a list of families still owed replacement grain. Hale Mill had survived, but survival had brought work rather than peace. Crowther and Hobb were examined before the magistrate at dawn. Dominic said. Hobb repeated his confession, and Crowther, he denies ordering the spoiled rye. He admits the diversion was built, but claims it was lawful drainage. The stones answer that. Yes, Rosamund placed the scoop on its proper hook. What of Arabella? Her statement has been accepted. The proceeds from the upstream lease remain frozen. She has agreed to remain at her aunt's house until the inquiry concludes. Agreed? The alternative was a formal summons and public questioning. Rosamund turned toward him. Did you arrange that? No, the magistrate did. He paused. I asked only that she not be blamed for acts she did not know about. Rosamund studied him. That was right. I hoped it was. There was no expectation in his voice, no attempt to turn good conduct into a claim on her. That mattered. Over the following months, the full shape of Crowther's plan emerged through ledgers, witness statements, and the records of the old Caldermere Survey Office. Hobb admitted he had copied Rosamund's signature from a grain receipt and used the stolen archives stamp to make the false delivery slip appear official. The Belhaven carpenter confessed to altering the water gauge, the buried boundary stones, the original lease, and Elias Venn's old registry marks proved that the upper bank had been falsified years earlier. Crowther's assets were attached toward damages while the court examined claims from Hale Mill, the affected families, and the parish bakers. No convenient witness appeared to solve the case. No lost surveyor returned with a perfect confession. The evidence already found was enough because Rosamund had preserved it before accusing anyone. By winter, Crowther's name had been removed from the lower granary. Compensation was ordered from his attached property. The Carter family received payment for physicians' expenses and lost work. Hale Mill received a renewed lease with the original title rights entered into both parish and county records. The 4 recovered boundary stones were reset in daylight before the magistrate, Captain Ames, Pike, Rosamund, and representatives from the neighboring farms. Rosamund insisted that every measurement be copied twice and every witness sign beneath it. She changed the mill's delivery practices as well. No unmarked sack entered the yard. Every cart, driver, merchant, and arrival time was recorded. Yet she refused to let fear turn the mill into a fortress. Trust should be examined, she told Pike, not abandoned. Dominic did not design these reforms for her. He offered 3 surveyors when she requested one, then accepted the man she chose. He presented 3 legal options for the upstream lease, and Rosamund selected a long-term covenant that preserved Hale Mill's water rights while leaving the land under independent trusteeship. When Caldermere tenants objected to a drainage proposal on another estate, Dominic delayed the work until they had been heard. He sent Rosamund the revised plan and asked for her judgment, not her approval of a decision already made. He called at Hale House twice each week, always in daylight, always through the front door, and never without a card. Mrs. Finch remained in the room for the first month. Pike joined their walks along the race for the second. Dominic accepted every boundary without humour or complaint. One December afternoon, Rosamund received a letter from Arabella. It contained no excuse. Arabella admitted that she had mistaken control for concern and respectability for virtue. She asked whether forgiveness might someday be possible. Rosamund answered that truth had prevented further harm, but consequence still mattered. She did not promise reconciliation. She did not refuse it forever. That choice remained hers. Dominic proposed in April beside the newly set boundary stone at the Willow Bend. The tide was low, leaving the channel clear beneath a pale sky. Mrs. Finch and Pike walked well behind them, close enough for propriety and far enough for honesty. Dominic carried a folded document rather than a ring. "That is an alarming beginning," Rosamund said. "It is a marriage settlement. More alarming." A brief smile touched his mouth. "Your income from Hale Mill remains yours. Your authority over its lease, workers, contracts, and accounts remains yours. No Caldermere trustee may interfere. Any shared property requires both signatures." He held out the document but did not place it in her hand. "You may read it today, tomorrow, or never." Rosamund looked at him. "And what are you asking besides my opinion of clauses?" His composure faltered. "I am asking you to marry me. Because you feel responsible for what happened?" "No, because Hale Mill now touches Caldermere land." "No, Because gratitude has confused itself with affection? No, his voice steadied. Because I love the way you refuse pity, because you measure responsibility before reputation, because you can forgive error without excusing it, because you make me understand that power is safest when it listens, and because I would rather spend my life learning how to stand beside you than return to the man who believed protection meant deciding alone. Rosamund let the words rest between them. You will make mistakes. I will. So will I. I know. And if you close another door in my name, you will open it. I will apologize before explaining why I thought it necessary. She laughed softly. The sound changed his face more than any declaration could have done. Rosamund took the settlement. I will read every line. I expected nothing less. And I will alter any line I dislike. I would be disappointed if you did not. She made 3 changes. Dominic accepted all 3. They married in the parish church in June without London's spectacle or grand company. The bakers brought bread made from Hale flour. Pike stood near the front. Mrs. Finch cried openly and denied it afterward. Dominic promised truth, consultation, and constancy. Rosamund promised the same. After a short journey to Caldemere, they returned to Devon because Rosamund chose to return. On the first morning back, she entered the grain room before sunrise. New winter wheat filled the bins with the clean scent of harvest. Dominic stopped at the doorway. He waited until Rosamund looked up. "You may come in," she said. He entered and held open the first sack. Rosamund took her father's wooden grain scoop from its hook. The worn ash wood fit her palm exactly as it always had. She filled it, leveled the measure, and poured the grain into the testing tray. Outside, the tide turned and entered the lawful race. The mill wheel began to move. Dominic held the sack, but did not reach for the scoop. Rosamund measured the next portion herself, while the river ran where it belonged, and the man beside her understood why that mattered.